I am Sabrina, a 32-year-old chief financial officer, and I was buried under a mountain of financial reports when my phone began vibrating incessantly against the mahogany desk. It was a frantic text message from my younger sister claiming she needed immediate funds for a master's program tuition deadline, or she would face expulsion. Although a knot of hesitation tightened in my stomach regarding the massive $50,000 request, my blind faith in education and family loyalty overruled my professional instincts. I handed my heavy platinum credit card to the driver to deliver to her without asking for a single receipt, because I genuinely believed I was investing in her future. I had no idea that she would take that card straight to a luxury Tesla showroom to purchase a vehicle she could not afford. She would soon confidently tell a salesperson that $100,000 was a small amount, only to face the public humiliation of a declined transaction that I personally orchestrated. If you enjoy watching entitled people get the harsh reality check they truly deserve, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Early that afternoon at the office, the air conditioning hummed a low monotony that contrasted sharply with the chaotic storm brewing on my phone screen. I unlocked the banking application with a sense of dread pooling in my stomach because the fraud alert I received was not for a tuition payment. The transaction history populated slowly before revealing a series of small test charges at high-end boutiques in the Merrick Park shopping district instead of the university registrar. These insignificant purchases were clearly made to ensure the card was active before a much larger transaction could be attempted at a nearby location. There was absolutely no record of any transfer to the University of Miami, despite Amber claiming the deadline was immediate. I decided to bypass my sister entirely and dialed the direct line for the University Administrative Office to get to the bottom of this discrepancy. The hold music played for what felt like an eternity before a representative finally answered with a tired voice. I identified myself as the primary financial sponsor for student Amber and requested a confirmation of her enrollment status for the current semester. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy before the administrator delivered the news that shattered my remaining patience. She informed me in a professional yet pitying tone that the student ID I provided was inactive because Amber had been academically dismissed 8 months ago for excessive absences. The realization hit me harder than any market crash because I had been paying her living expenses and rent for nearly a year, while she was not even a student. She had been lying to my face every single time we met for dinner while pretending to be stressed about exams that did not exist. A sudden memory from this morning flashed through my mind regarding the behavior of my parents, Richard and Susan, who had been unusually insistent that I hand over the credit card. I recalled how Mom had wiped away fake tears about Amber's potential future, while Dad guilt-tripped me by saying I was too controlling with my money. It became sickeningly clear that this was not just a desperate lie from a spoiled younger sister, but a coordinated heist orchestrated by the people who raised me. They were all in on the scheme to extract $50,000 from me under the guise of education so they could likely purchase a luxury vehicle. My entire family was treating me like an unlimited ATM while mocking my hard work behind my back. My thumb hovered over the option to report the card as stolen, which would have immediately frozen the account and stopped the transaction. However, simply declining the card felt like too easy of an escape for people who had planned such a deliberate betrayal against their own blood. I wanted them to feel the same public humiliation they were currently inflicting on me by spending my hard-earned money without a second thought. I navigated to the authorized user settings for the platinum card Amber was holding and selected the spending limit option with cold precision. I carefully deleted the $50,000 limit and typed in a new maximum allowance of exactly $1 before saving the changes. The banking app confirmed the update instantly, which meant the card would still appear active to any preliminary system check, but would decline any transaction larger than a pack of gum. A wave of pure fury propelled me out of the office chair as I grabbed my car keys without saying a word to my assistant. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt like it took an eternity as I visualized the scene I was about to interrupt. I climbed into my sedan and punched the address from the transaction alert into the navigation system with trembling hands. The GPS confirmed that the Tesla showroom in Coral Gables was only a short drive from my current location. I merged into the afternoon traffic with a singular focus on catching them in the middle of their celebration, because I needed to see their faces when the reality of their situation crashed down on them. I was not going there to save them or to pay their bill, but rather to witness the exact moment their house of cards collapsed. The sun glared off the hood of my car as I sped toward the showroom where my family was undoubtedly popping champagne with my money. Exactly at 2:15 p.m., my car stopped across the street from the gleaming glass facade of the Tesla dealership in Coral Gables. I kept the engine running and lowered my sunglasses to get a better and unobstructed view of the ridiculous spectacle unfolding inside the climate-controlled showroom. The floor-to-ceiling windows acted like a massive television screen, displaying the most infuriating reality show I had ever witnessed involving my own family. From my vantage point, I could clearly see Amber draping herself over the hood of a pristine white Tesla Model X Plaid, while holding her phone at the perfect angle for a live stream. She was twisting her body into various unnatural poses to ensure her online followers could see both her designer outfit and the expensive vehicle she claimed to be buying. There was absolutely no sign of the frantic student who had texted me about a tuition emergency just a few hours ago, because she looked completely relaxed and incredibly smug. My parents were lounging in the designated VIP waiting area just a few feet away from her performance like they owned the place. They sat on the plush leather sofas with their legs crossed and chins held high as if they were royalty holding court in a palace. My father suddenly stood up from the comfortable sofa and gestured aggressively at a young man in a uniform who was trying to organize some paperwork at a nearby desk. Richard's face was twisted in an ugly expression of entitlement that I had seen too many times before when he wanted to intimidate service workers. He pointed a finger directly at the young man's face and bellowed across the showroom floor for everyone to hear. "Hey, you over there? What kind of service is this supposed to be? VIP customers buying a $100,000 car have to drink this cold coffee." I gripped the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles turned white as I watched the salesperson Michael rush away to fetch a fresh cup. The only reason the staff was tolerating this abusive behavior was because of the heavy platinum credit card that Amber was casually flipping between her fingers like a toy. That piece of plastic was their shield and their weapon, because it signaled to the world that they had unlimited resources to burn. My mother was just as complicit in this charade as she ran her hands over the premium upholstery of the display model next to her. Susan nodded enthusiastically at Amber while pointing out the various features of the luxury electric SUV as if she were an expert. She looked completely delusional as she praised the vehicle's design as if her own hard work had paid for it instead of my savings. Susan turned to the returning salesperson and added her own layer of pressure to the situation with a haughty tone. "Hurry up! My daughter doesn't have all day, she is a future master's graduate." The audacity of using the master's degree lie while simultaneously shopping for a luxury car was almost impressive in its shamelessness. It made my stomach churn to hear my mother validate the very lie that they had used to scam me out of $50,000 just this morning. Amber finally finished her recording session and snapped her fingers at Michael to get his attention immediately. She looked at the car with hungry eyes and made her demand with the confidence of someone who has never been told no in her entire life. "Bring the white one out right now, I want to drive it home before dinner to film a TikTok video." The young salesperson forced a strained smile onto his face and nodded quickly before hurrying toward the back office to prepare the necessary paperwork for a sale that he believed was imminent. My family exchanged excited high fives and settled back onto the comfortable leather couches to await the delivery of their stolen prize, with satisfied grins on their faces. They had absolutely no idea that the credit card they were relying on to fuel this lifestyle had already been stripped of its power just minutes ago. The performance inside the showroom was about to reach its absolute climax, and I sat silently in the driver's seat of my car, waiting for the inevitable moment when their expensive fantasy would crash violently into the wall of reality. 10 minutes later, the atmosphere inside the showroom began to heat up as the paperwork was finally arranged on the pristine marble counter of the finance department. Amber strutted toward the desk with the confident gait of a woman who believed she owned the world, while her parents trailed behind her like eager entourage members awaiting their share of the spoils. She reached the counter and carelessly tossed the heavy metal card onto the stone surface with a loud clatter that made the nearby customers turn their heads in surprise. She looked at the finance manager with a bored expression and waved her hand dismissively while instructing him to charge the entire amount in a single transaction so she could leave immediately. The young salesman Michael picked up the card with trembling hands and inserted it into the chip reader while the machine processed the request. The cheerful beep that usually signaled a successful sale was replaced by a harsh and dissonant buzzer sound that echoed through the quiet space. The small digital screen flashed a bright red notification with the word "declined" in bold letters that seemed to mock the arrogance standing on the other side of the counter. Michael cleared his throat nervously and tried to explain the situation discreetly, but Amber snatched the card back and glared at him with pure venom in her eyes. She slammed the card back down onto the counter, leaned forward aggressively, and shouted directly into his face with absolute conviction. "Are you kidding me? This card has an unlimited limit. Swipe it again right now." Michael hesitated for a moment before nodding submissively and initiating the transaction protocol for a second time under the intense scrutiny of three angry people. The processing icon spun on the screen for several agonizing seconds before the same rejection message appeared with finality. The air in the room became heavy with tension as the reality of the situation began to set in for everyone except my delusional family. Michael looked up with genuine apology written on his face, though I knew he was secretly terrified of the reaction he was about to receive from these unreasonable clients. He took a small step back for safety and delivered the news as professionally as he could manage. "Miss the machine reports declined for the second time. Do you have another method of payment?" The question acted like a spark in a powder keg, causing my parents to instantly abandon their relaxed postures and join the fray. Richard stormed up to the counter and slammed his hand down next to the card reader, demanding to speak to the general manager about the incompetence of the staff. Susan chimed in with her shrill voice, accusing the dealership of profiling them and threatening to file a massive lawsuit for emotional distress and wasted time. Amber looked at the machine in disbelief, her face turning a deep shade of crimson that clashed horribly with her designer dress. She could not comprehend a world where her desires were not immediately gratified by my money because she had never faced a financial rejection in her life. She threw her hands up in the air and let out a scream of frustration that silenced the entire showroom floor. "It's only $100,000. How can it be declined? Your machine must be broken." The silence that followed her outburst was deafening, broken only by the sound of muffled whispers from other patrons who had stopped looking at cars to watch the meltdown. Panic finally started to replace the anger in Amber's eyes as she realized the card was truly not working and she had no backup plan. She fumbled in her purse with shaking hands and pulled out her smartphone to dial the one person she always called to fix her problems. From my vantage point across the street, I saw my own phone light up on the passenger seat with her name flashing urgently on the display. I sat perfectly still in the air-conditioned comfort of my sedan and watched the screen glow without making a single move to answer it. The vibration of the phone against the leather seat felt like a purring cat, a tangible confirmation that the trap had snapped shut exactly as I had intended. Inside the glass walls, Amber stared at her phone in confusion when the call went to voicemail, her confidence evaporating like water on hot pavement. The other customers in the showroom were no longer hiding their amusement, pointing openly at the group of people who had been acting like royalty just minutes ago. The whispers of fraud and fake rich began to circulate through the room, reaching the ears of my parents who looked around frantically for an escape route that did not involve humiliation. They stood frozen under the judgmental gaze of the public, stripped of the false power that my credit card had provided them, looking small and pathetic in the middle of all that luxury. 5 minutes later, as the showroom manager was preparing to call security to escort the disruptive group off the premises, I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped into the cool air of the dealership. My heels clicked rhythmically against the polished tile floor, with a sound that cut through the murmuring crowd like a knife, instantly drawing the attention of everyone in the room. I walked with the deliberate confidence of someone who controls the capital, my posture straight, and my expression completely unreadable behind my designer sunglasses. My parents and Amber looked up from their huddled panic, and their faces instantly relaxed with a wave of immense relief because they foolishly believed their financial savior had finally arrived. They thought I was there to fix the banking error and smooth over the embarrassment so they could drive away in their new toy. Amber was the first to react, sprinting toward me with desperation written all over her face as she reached out to grab my handbag. She assumed I had brought a backup credit card to resolve the situation, and she hissed at me to hurry up because she was tired of waiting. I sidestepped her grasping hands with a fluid motion and walked directly past her to the counter where the bewildered salesperson was still holding my rejected platinum card. Without saying a word to my confused family, I reached out and firmly plucked the heavy metal card from Michael's hand. I held it up to the light for a brief second to inspect it before turning around to face the entire room. I cleared my throat to ensure my voice would carry to the furthest corner of the showroom and address the staff and the onlookers with absolute clarity. I apologize for the disturbance, everyone, but there will be no Tesla sold to this family today. This card belongs to me, and I did not authorize this transaction or any other purchase here. The silence that descended upon the room was heavy and suffocating as the realization hit the crowd that this was not a technical glitch, but a family intervention. Amber stood frozen in her tracks, her mouth hanging open in shock as she processed the fact that I was not there to help her. She lunged forward again, her face twisting into a mask of pure entitlement, and screamed at me while pointing frantically at the card in my hand. "What the hell are you doing? Give me the card, everyone is watching." I looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust, feeling the last threads of my patience finally snap under the weight of her ingratitude. I took a step closer to her so she could see the disappointment in my eyes, but I kept my voice loud enough for my parents to hear every single syllable. "You dropped out 8 months ago, Amber. What tuition money buys a Tesla wake-up?" The revelation hit the room like a physical blow, causing gasps to ripple through the small crowd of onlookers who had been wondering about the drama. My mother covered her mouth with her hand and sank back onto the leather sofa as if her legs had suddenly lost the strength to support her weight. The lie she had helped cultivate was now exposed in the most public way possible, stripping away the facade of the successful academic daughter she loved to brag about. My father, however, was not ready to accept defeat so easily because his ego was far too fragile to handle this level of public shaming. Richard marched up to me with his face turning a dangerous shade of purple, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me into submission, just like he used to do when I was a child. He lowered his voice to a menacing growl, but the desperation in his tone was audible to everyone standing nearby. "Sabrina, don't cause a scene. Pay the money now and we'll talk at home. Are you trying to humiliate your parents here?" I looked at the man who had raised me, the man who was supposed to protect me, but had instead chosen to exploit me for a luxury car. I realized in that moment that he cared more about the opinion of these strangers than he did about the fact that his daughter had been stealing from me. I slowly put the credit card back into my wallet and snapped it shut with a finality that echoed in the quiet room. I stared directly into his angry eyes and shook my head, slowly refusing to be bullied by his empty threats any longer. The power dynamic in our family had shifted permanently in this moment, and for the first time in my life, I was the one holding all the cards while they were left with nothing but their lies. 20 minutes later, under the scorching heat of the parking lot, the oppressive humidity of the Florida afternoon wrapped around us like a heavy blanket. We had been politely but firmly asked to leave the premises by the dealership manager, and now my family was chasing after me across the asphalt as I headed toward my own vehicle. They were sweating profusely in their designer clothes, their faces flushed not just from the heat, but from the lingering embarrassment of being exposed as frauds in front of an audience. Instead of apologizing for their deception or showing any remorse for trying to steal $50,000 from me, they immediately launched into a tirade of accusations. They played the victims with practiced ease, accusing me of being a jealous sister and an ungrateful daughter who had deliberately staged this scene to humiliate them. Amber was crying loud theatrical tears about her ruined reputation, while my father grumbled about how I had disrespected his authority in public. I stopped abruptly next to the black Lexus SUV that my parents had driven to the showroom earlier that afternoon. This was the vehicle I had purchased 2 years ago to ensure they had safe transportation, a car that I paid the insurance and registration for every single month. I turned to face them, ignoring their stream of insults, and held out my open palm directly toward my father. I did not engage in a shouting match or try to defend my actions, because the time for negotiation had passed the moment they decided to lie to me. I looked Richard dead in the eye and delivered my demand, with a calm intensity that cut through their noise. "Give me the keys to the Lexus, right now. That is my car." My father recoiled as if I had slapped him, clutching the key fob in his pocket like a lifeline. He looked at me with a mixture of shock and outrage, unable to comprehend that I was stripping away yet another layer of their unearned comfort. My mother stepped in front of him, shielding him with her body while wiping sweat from her forehead. She looked at the shimmering heat waves rising off the pavement and then back at me with eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you crazy? How are your father and sister supposed to get home? It's scorching out here." I remained unmoved by her plea, because I knew exactly how many times I had stood in the heat waiting for a bus while I was building the career that now supported their lifestyle. They hesitated, looking at each other in a panic, clearly hoping I was bluffing. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed 3 numbers on the keypad without breaking eye contact. I held the screen up so they could see the numbers 911 ready to be dialed. I told them very clearly that if the keys were not in my hand within 10 seconds, I would report the vehicle as stolen and they would be explaining themselves to the police instead of me. The color drained from my father's face as he realized I was absolutely serious. He fished the keys out of his pocket with trembling hands and slammed them into my palm with a grunt of frustration. I pocketed the keys and reached into my purse to pull out a few crumpled dollar bills that I usually kept for valet tips. I tossed the money onto the hood of the Lexus where it fluttered slightly in the hot breeze. It was enough for 3 bus fares, which was more charity than they deserved after the stunt they had pulled today. I turned my back on them and walked toward my sedan, the sound of their protests fading into the background noise of the busy street. I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat, the blast of air conditioning hitting my face like a breath of freedom. I rolled down the window just an inch to deliver my final words to the 3 figures standing helplessly on the burning asphalt. "That is no longer my problem. Good luck with the bus." I rolled the window up before they could respond and pulled out of the parking lot, watching in the rearview mirror as they shrank into small, angry dots in the distance. My phone immediately began to buzz on the passenger seat, lighting up with a barrage of hateful text messages from Mom. She was calling me every name in the book, accusing me of abandoning my family and threatening to disown me if I didn't turn around. I pulled over safely to the side of the road a few blocks away, picked up the phone, and opened the contact settings. One by one, I selected the numbers for Amber, Richard, and Susan, and I pressed block contact on each of them. The silence that followed was instant and profound. For the first time in my adult life, the constant noise of their demands was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of my engine as I drove toward a future that was finally mine alone. 1 week after the event at the showroom, the reality of the situation finally caught up with my family on the doorstep of the very sanctuary they had taken for granted. My parents and Amber arrived back at my Coral Gables villa after a long and fruitless day of trying to secure alternative funds, fully expecting to retreat into the air-conditioned comfort of the guest wing. They approached the massive mahogany front doors with their usual air of ownership and reached out to punch their code into the keypad of the smart lock system. Instead of the welcoming green light and the mechanical click of the bolt retracting, the panel flashed a harsh red warning light indicating that access was denied. They tried the code again with increasing franticness before realizing that their digital keys had been completely wiped from the system server. They walked around to the side of the house in a panic and discovered the garage door was open just enough to reveal a stack of cardboard boxes arranged haphazardly on the concrete floor. These boxes contained their clothes, their toiletries, and the few personal items they actually owned, all packed away by professional movers I had hired the day before. Taped prominently to the top box was a thick envelope bearing the official letterhead of my legal counsel, Mr. Vance, containing a court summons and a formal notice to quit. The document stated in no uncertain terms that their permission to reside on the property had been revoked, and they had exactly 30 days to vacate the premises permanently in accordance with Florida state law. My father turned a shade of crimson that rivaled the warning light on the door lock as he ripped his phone from his pocket to dial the number printed on the legal stationery. He paced back and forth on the driveway, while the phone rang, preparing to unleash his fury on the person he believed was just a subordinate he could bully. When Mr. Vance finally answered the call with his calm and professional baritone, Richard did not waste a single second on pleasantries or introductions. He screamed into the receiver with the desperate entitlement of a man who was watching his free ride disappear before his very eyes. "What are you saying, eviction? This is my daughter's house. I have a right to be here." Mr. Vance waited for my father to finish his outburst before delivering the cold legal reality that cut through the emotional manipulation like a scalpel. I had instructed Mr. Vance to handle all communications because I refused to let them guilt-trip me ever again. "On paper, you are merely guests. My client has terminated your residency rights. Any attempt to forcibly enter will be considered a criminal offense." The call ended abruptly, leaving Richard staring at his phone in disbelief as the screen went black, because I had also canceled the family data plan that very morning. The financial dominoes continued to fall rapidly as they discovered that their health insurance policies had been terminated and their memberships to the local country club were suspended for non-payment. They were suddenly stranded in a world that required cash for survival, and they had absolutely no reserves because they had spent every penny assuming I would always be there to refill the coffers. Desperation forced them to scramble for survival in a way they had not experienced in over a decade. Amber attempted to apply for several high-level marketing positions in the city, walking into interviews with the arrogance of a CEO, despite having no degree and no experience. She was rejected repeatedly and humiliated when hiring managers pointed out her lack of qualifications, forcing her to consider entry-level service jobs she felt were beneath her. My parents fared no better as they humbled themselves to call distant relatives they had previously ignored to ask for loans. The word of their attempted fraud at the Tesla dealership had apparently spread through the family grapevine, resulting in polite but firm refusals from everyone they contacted. By the end of the month, with the eviction deadline looming over their heads like a dark cloud, they had no choice but to scrape together their meager remaining cash to rent a small apartment. It was located in a rundown complex on the far outskirts of the city, miles away from the manicured lawns and ocean breezes of Coral Gables. They stood in the center of the cramped living room with peeling paint and stained carpets, the smell of mildew and stale cooking oil hanging heavy in the stagnant air. Amber dropped her designer bag onto the dirty floor and looked around at her new reality, with tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. "Mom, I am not staying in this slum. It smells so bad." 1 month later, my life had completely changed in ways I never expected. The silence that filled my sprawling Coral Gables villa was no longer a source of loneliness, but a refreshing sanctuary of peace. My bank accounts were growing at an unprecedented rate now that I was no longer hemorrhaging money to support the lavish lifestyles of 3 capable adults. The constant anxiety that used to tighten my chest every time my phone rang had vanished, replaced by a sense of calm control over my own destiny. I sat on my terrace drinking coffee, realizing that cutting off the dead weight was the most profitable investment I had ever made. During a drive through a commercial district on the edge of town yesterday, I stopped at a red light and witnessed a scene that confirmed my decision was correct. I looked out my window and saw a figure in a dull gray janitorial uniform scrubbing the graffiti off a storefront window with frantic movements. It was Amber. She looked nothing like the arrogant girl who had demanded a Tesla just weeks ago. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her face was devoid of makeup, and she looked exhausted. A heavy-set manager was standing over her, pointing a finger in her face and shouting about streaks on the glass, replicating the exact behavior my father used to inflict on service workers. My parents were reportedly faring no better, having taken low-wage jobs at a local warehouse to pay the rent for their cramped apartment. The haughty arrogance that had defined them for decades had been scrubbed away by the harsh reality of manual labor and budgeting. They were finally learning the value of $1 the hard way, sweating for every cent instead of demanding it from me. As the traffic light turned green, I did not roll down my window to say hello or offer a ride. I simply pressed the accelerator and drove past them like a stranger. I realized that stopping to help would only rob them of the essential life lessons they were finally absorbing. Leaving them to face the consequences of their actions was not cruelty. It was the only form of genuine love left to give. We are often conditioned by society to believe that family loyalty should be unconditional, regardless of how toxic or destructive those relationships become. My story serves as a stark reminder that sharing DNA is not a license for exploitation. True generosity involves helping others stand on their own feet while enabling only cripples them and creates a cycle of dependency. There is a profound difference between being a supportive family member and being a financial host for parasites who refuse to contribute. Learning to say no to the people we love is one of the hardest things to do, but it is often the only way to protect our own well-being and force them to grow. You must value your own peace and hard work enough